Not my usual tone of content, but I just felt like it. Savvy? Hi guys, and welcome to my Pirates of the Caribbean ranking. I've been a fan of this series for a long time now. In fact, it was just after the third film came out that I started following these films and keeping up to date with the latest news on them. It's been a long time now since that third of 5 films came out, 15 years in fact. They don't release these films very often, and quite possibly they won't release any more, given that Johnny Depp apparently doesn't want to play Jack Sparrow again. This is probably the lightest franchise that I'm into. I can't think of any other series of films that have more comedy in them than these films that I like. In fact, I can't actually think of any other franchise that I like that is known for its comedy, like Pirates of the Caribbean is. So clearly there's something about these films that just really does it for me. But let's get into talking about them on an individual keel. We'll start, of course, with the one that I consider to be the worst and work our way up to the best. So let's find out then what, in my opinion, is the worst film in this franchise. This is the second film in the franchise. It doesn't have a number next to its name, but don't worry, I will remind you as we're going along where each film fits in numerically. Let me also say that I still like this film, even though it's come bottom. There are no bad films in this franchise for me. This one just happens to be the worst of an extremely good bunch. But there are two reasons why I have put it bottom. The first is the fact that it's the second part of a trilogy. They filmed the second and the third one back to back, I believe. And this one just ends on a cliffhanger. It doesn't have a proper ending. I'm always really cynical about films that just seem to be leading into another film rather than conclude the story that they're telling. And yeah, there's no proper ending to this. We end up with Jack sort of appearing to jump into a kraken's mouth, and the first time I saw it, I was like, "Oh, what? You're going to leave it like that?" So that's not ideal. I mean, I feel the same about Star Wars. You know, everybody bangs on about The Empire Strikes Back being the best Star Wars film, but not for me. I'm just kind of like unsatisfied with the ending to that. I much prefer Return of the Jedi. It finishes things off. Also in this film, there are a couple of sequences where things just get a little bit too unrealistic for me. Now, before you throw tomatoes at the screen, yes, I do know that this series is full of comical fantasy type stuff that couldn't happen in real life. Yes, it's meant to be aloof and silly and not entirely taken seriously, but this is the only film out of all 5 where some of the silliness really bothers me. I think they just went a little bit too far in this one. It's like they didn't quite yet know where the line was to be drawn, you know? Because once you get to the third film, it kind of dials down the silliness a little bit and just gets a little bit more serious. So, give you some examples about this film. Firstly, the scene where Jack puts like a big giant kebab stick on himself with like grapefruits and melons, and he falls between 2 cliffs. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it's like something out of the Coyote and Roadrunner cartoon. He's like, he's crashing through rope bridges and things, and he would break every bone in his body if he tried that in real life, and yet he just gets up on the ground and is like, yep, just carry on with my adventure. No, I really have a problem with that scene. And the sad part of it is the rest of that whole section with the cannibals is absolutely brilliant, with the wooden ball things that they have to swing back and forth and climb up the rock and stuff. I love the whole scene on the island, just not that one part with Jack's fall. It's awful. And then later on, there's a scene where Jack and 2 others, they're having like this sword fight on this rolling wheel type thing. And at one point, the wheel goes over Jack's head and his head goes through the wood. If that was real life, his head would be mashed to a pulp. It's like, oh, what are you doing? No, that's just not right. So yeah, there's moments in this that make me think that could never happen. But throughout all the wackiness still to come, third film, fourth film, fifth film, with things like mermaids and all sorts of random stuff, I never ever feel the same about what they do in the later films. For some reason, they just about manage to keep it believable in those later ones. But I still like this film. The stuff with the Kraken is absolutely amazing. You know, the Kraken is this film's big selling point. Its big highlight. All the times that the Kraken's attacking a ship in this is absolutely fantastic. And the story of this film is pretty damn good. So on the whole, I still like it. I still have a good time with it. I watched all 5 of these again quite recently just to prepare for this ranking, and I still had a good time. But yeah, those one or two little moments just made it very easy for me in the end to just put this one below all the others. This might be a little bit of a surprise that I've only put the original in 4th. I've often heard critics and casual cinema goers say that the first Pirates film is absolutely great, but the sequel's not so good. I'm not sure that would hold, though, with genuine fans of the series, because even though I think this film is absolutely flawless, really, there's nothing wrong with it. I just think that as you go through the franchise into the later films, they do make the humour even funnier, the characters get even better, the situations just become more and more enjoyable. It's like they learn from each film in this series and just keep making them better and better. So I don't hold water with the idea that this original is somehow king over all the others. I mean, it's great, don't get me wrong, but during these recent rewatches, I got even more out of the later films. The only thing that annoys me about this first film is the trailer rather than the film itself. So when this came out, the trailer was all over the TV for like weeks on end, and it started to get on the nerves of me and my housemate of the time. And there's this one line of dialogue in the trailer where Barbossa says, "You better start believing in ghost stories. You're in one." And we heard this so often, just sat in our living room, that we started to take the piss out of it. We were just fed up of seeing this trailer on repeat every day. And I think maybe the trailer at the time was what put me off watching the original film in the cinema, because it wasn't until the third one that I finally saw my first Pirates of the Caribbean film. But getting back to the actual film itself, it's fine. It's really, really good. I just think there was even better to come. This is the third one in the series, and I remembered this as being possibly my favourite coming into these rewatches that I did. So I'm a little bit surprised that it's only come third today. There was quite a bit of criticism of this one when it came out. People said the plot was a bit too complicated. They couldn't understand what was going on. I actually remember going to work this one time, and there were 2 people talking about the movie, a few banks of desks over, and someone said to this other person, "Oh, I couldn't understand what the hell was going on. The story was all over the place." And I sort of sympathise with that. If this film is the first Pirates of the Caribbean film you ever watch, you can't just jump into this series halfway through. You have to watch them in order. It's that type of series. You can't start with this film. You just can't. There are way too many callbacks to the earlier films. It's basically a follow-on from part 2. It's essentially the same story, and this is the part 2, if you like. 2 and 3 in this series are easily the most interweaved films out of the whole bunch. This was actually my first film in the series, and I had a similar experience to my colleague. I couldn't understand what the hell was going on. I was actually on a date at the time. Now, when I was younger and I used to go on dates now and again that involved a cinema trip, my mind was never fully on the movie anyway, and this situation with Pirates of the Caribbean 3 was the worst out of all of them, I think. I was just completely lost after the first 10 minutes. So when I came out of the cinema, I didn't think I was destined to be a fan of these films at all, but then I just randomly tried the first film when it came on TV at some point, and to my surprise, I just really enjoyed it once I was watching it from the beginning. And then when I got back to the third film, I had a completely different experience with it. Suddenly I understood the plot, I was having a good time. You have to concentrate on these films. You know, it's. I think some people come into them thinking, oh, it's just going to be pirates with a little love story in there, and, you know, it'd be really easy to follow. It's Disney at the end of the day, but it's not. You've got to sort of make sure that you don't miss any of it, because they do get quite complex, especially the second and third films, I think, especially this third one. But I really like it. It is the longest film in the franchise, but I certainly don't notice it when I'm watching it. There's only one little part of this film, actually, that I don't like, which is when Will and Elizabeth are fighting some of Davy Jones' men towards the end, and between fighting, they're sort of having a conversation about getting married, and then Barbossa actually does marry them. It's kind of like, really? You're going to do that in the middle of a sword battle on a ship with like a big typhoon thing whatever that thing's called that's right next to them, that the ship's in danger of going into. You just wouldn't do it, would you? It's a little bit silly, but it's still not as bad as Jack doing his coyote fall in part two. That was the worst of the worst. But on the whole, great film. If this had been the last of a trilogy, it would have been a very, very great end. This is the fifth and final film in the series. I watched it just yesterday for the second time. The first being when it first came out at the cinema, so that would have been 5 years ago. So it had been a while, but the film felt very fresh to me watching it yesterday. Like, a lot of the stuff in it I just didn't remember was in there, so it was almost like a new film. Well, let's just say that it felt like half of a new film. But I had such a good time, and it's so emotional towards the end of this. I'd completely forgotten that Will and Elizabeth come back into it, albeit briefly. And even before then, you get this emotional scene between Barbossa and his daughter on the anchor thing when it's been raised out of the water. That entire final section of the movie where the oceans part, just absolutely brilliant. The CGI works so well. It's so colourful. It's so well done. Going back to earlier in the film, there's a fantastic sequence where there's like a bank robbery gone wrong and this house going through the streets. My daughter joined me yesterday to watch some of the film with me, and we were both absolutely laughing our asses off at this failed bank heist thing. It's really good. And another great scene as well, the zombie sharks. Absolutely loved that as well. There's just so much great content in this film. It's absolutely fantastic. I like some of the new characters as well. Not so much the villain. He's a little bit samey, a little bit similar to some of the pirate ghost villains we've had in the past. I might have preferred a human villain in this, maybe. But the, shall we say, good new characters, I think, are a lot better. So Will's son and Karina, the woman, really fantastic. Karina's played by Kea Scodelario. I might have that surname. I might have butchered the surname, but she's an actress who just seems to be popping up in so many films that I've watched in recent times. Crawl and the new Resident Evil. She's really, really good, and she does a good job in this film. So overall, I just thought this film was absolutely phenomenal for a fifth film in a series. It's not quite my favourite film today. It's not beyond the realms of possibility this could go on to become my favourite Pirates of the Caribbean film in the future. I'm not quite putting it there today, but it's close. These top two for me are head and shoulders above the bottom three. But let's find out what officially today is my favourite Pirates of the Caribbean movie. So this is the fourth film out of 5 that is my favourite. I don't think it's quite as emotional as the fifth film, but it is my favourite adventure, this chase for the Fountain of Youth. It's really cool. It's a very streamlined plot compared to what you get in the third film. Now, I love the complicated nature of At World's End, but once you've watched that, it's nice to come to this and you've got this more simple affair of all these different factions going after this one prize. But honestly, me talking about this film, it's just going to be a platitude fest, honestly. The soundtrack in this is the best in the series, no doubt for me on that score. Great villain, Blackbeard, one of the best in the franchise. The actor who plays him, I forget his name, he's in John Wick as well, but he's absolutely terrific. Penelope Cruz does a good job in this. There are a number of new characters that come into this one and make a real impact. I really like the whole mermaid subplot. I just think that's absolutely fantastic. The one mermaid who's in it more than the others, she's a nice character. Also the priest who sort of falls for the mermaid, he does a good contribution to this film as well. All the stuff between Barbossa and Jack is absolutely on point, and I like the fact that a lot of this film is centered in the jungle rather than just being out at sea as well. It just gives you a nice little contrast when it comes to the aesthetic of the film. It's just great. It is my favourite. It is the best of the bunch for me, but obviously opinions will differ. It is weird that my favourite 2 in this franchise are the last 2 out of 5. That is unheard of for most people when they do a ranking. It's certainly unheard of for me. I can't think of any other occasion where that's happened for me when I've been doing a ranking, that the last 2 films would be the top 2. But do let me know in the comments how you would rank these. I'm especially curious to see whether everybody has the original top and it's just me that has it quite low down. And I guess I'm also curious to see where people place these final two films, because for me they're just a massive uptick on the original trilogy, which is just not what I expected, but it is what has happened. But On Stranger Tides is absolutely my favourite. Only the fifth film could come close to it potentially. And I think I've waffled enough. I will leave it there for today. That was my Pirates of the Caribbean ranking. So until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.